I used to believe that trust was the strongest thing in a marriage. I thought love could survive anything as long as two people were honest with each other. I thought if you gave someone your heart completely, they would protect it. I was wrong. If someone had told me 15 years ago that the man sleeping beside me every night was living another life, I would have laughed. I would have defended him. I would have called it impossible. Because to me, my husband wasn't just my husband. He was my best friend. He was my safe place, or at least that's what I thought. My name is Emily, and this story began when I was 27 years old. I met Daniel on a rainy Thursday evening. I had just finished work and was standing outside a small coffee shop, trying to open my umbrella. The wind was so strong that it turned my umbrella inside out. I remember feeling frustrated. Then suddenly someone laughed. I looked up and saw a tall man with dark hair and kind eyes. He walked toward me. "I think your umbrella just gave up on life," he said. I couldn't help smiling. Apparently it has. He offered to walk me to my car under his umbrella. Normally, I never talked to strangers, but there was something comfortable about him. We talked for 10 minutes, then 20. Before leaving, he asked for my number. I gave it to him. At the time, I had no idea that simple decision would change the course of my entire life. Daniel was charming. He wasn't rich. He didn't wear expensive clothes or drive a fancy car, but he knew how to make people feel special. He remembered little things: my favorite coffee, my favorite flowers. The fact that I hated thunderstorms and couldn't sleep when it rained heavily. He paid attention, and after years of disappointing relationships, it felt wonderful to be noticed. We started dating. Every day with him felt easy. I laughed more, I smiled more, I even started believing in forever. About 2 years later, he proposed. Nothing fancy. No expensive ring hidden inside a dessert. No crowd, no cameras, just the two of us sitting beside a lake during sunset. He held my hand and looked nervous. "I don't have everything figured out," he said. "I don't have millions of dollars and I probably never will, but I know one thing," I smiled. "What?" "I want every version of my future to include you." I actually cried. Then I said yes. It was the easiest decision of my life. Our wedding was small, close family, a few friends, simple decorations, simple food, simple happiness. I remember dancing with Daniel that night. He whispered something in my ear. "I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you're happy." I believed him. I really did. The first few years of our marriage were beautiful. We rented a small apartment. Money was tight. Sometimes we worried about paying bills. Sometimes we ate inexpensive meals for an entire week, but none of it mattered. We were together. And somehow that made everything feel possible. I worked as an accountant. Daniel worked in construction. His schedule was unpredictable. Sometimes he came home exhausted. Sometimes he worked weekends. But whenever he was home, he made me feel loved. Every morning, he kissed my forehead before leaving. Every night, he asked me about my day. I remember one evening. I was sitting on our old sofa. I looked around our tiny apartment and smiled. "We're poor," I joked. Daniel laughed. "Temporarily poor." "How temporary?" He wrapped his arm around me. "I don't know. But one day we'll have a beautiful house and everything we've ever wanted." I leaned my head on his shoulder. "And kids," he smiled. "Definitely kids." That was our dream: a house, a family. A future together. We started trying for a baby. At first it was exciting. Every month felt full of hope. We talked about baby names. We imagined birthdays. We discussed what color we would paint the nursery. I could almost see our future. Then months passed. Nothing happened. Then another year passed. Still nothing. Eventually, I visited doctors. More tests followed, then more waiting. I remember sitting in the doctor's office. The room felt cold. The doctor looked sympathetic. Then she spoke. "It may be difficult for you to have children naturally." May be difficult, such simple words. Yet they shattered me. I drove home in silence. That evening, I sat on our bed and cried. I cried harder than I had ever cried in my life. Daniel sat beside me. He held my hand. "I'm sorry," I whispered. He looked confused. "For what?" I couldn't even look at him. "For failing you." His face changed immediately. He gently lifted my chin. You didn't fail me, but you wanted children. I wanted a life with you. Tears rolled down my face. But I can't give you everything. He hugged me. You are everything. I remember crying into his shoulder. I remember thinking that I had married the most loving man in the world. I had no idea how wrong I was. After that, something changed inside me. I buried myself in work. Maybe I was trying to escape my sadness. Maybe I needed a purpose. Whatever the reason, I worked harder than ever before. I accepted extra responsibilities, stayed late, worked weekends, and slowly my career grew. I received promotions, then another promotion. My salary increased. I became financially successful. Daniel seemed genuinely proud of me. I married a genius, he would joke. I would laugh. But deep inside, I still carried the pain of not becoming a mother, so I focused on something else, our future. I became obsessed with saving money. I created budgets, investment accounts, retirement plans. I wanted us to have security. I wanted us to grow old comfortably. I often worked 12-hour days. I sacrificed vacations. I rarely bought expensive things for myself. Every extra dollar went toward our future. Daniel supported my decisions, or at least that's what I believed. As years passed, another change happened. Daniel started traveling more. Construction projects, he said. Different cities, new opportunities. Sometimes he was gone for 3 days, sometimes 5. Occasionally an entire week. I missed him terribly. The house felt empty without him, but I trusted him. Trust. Funny how dangerous that word can be. Whenever he returned home, he brought little gifts. Flowers, chocolate, souvenirs from different places. I thought it was sweet. My friends thought I was lucky. You have a husband who still brings you gifts after all these years, one friend said. I smiled proudly. I know, I truly thought I knew him. Years continued passing. 10 years of marriage, then 12, then 14. Life became comfortable. We bought a beautiful home. Our savings grew. I started thinking about early retirement. Sometimes I imagined the future. Maybe we couldn't have children. Maybe our family looked different than I once imagined. But we still had each other. That had to be enough, or so I kept telling myself. Then small things began happening. Things I ignored, things I should have questioned. Daniel became more protective of his phone. He started taking calls outside. Sometimes I walked into a room and he quickly put his phone away. I noticed, but I didn't worry. After 15 years together, suspicion never crossed my mind. One evening he smiled at his phone. I laughed. What? He looked up. What? You're smiling, he shrugged. Just something funny, I smiled. Secret girlfriend? He laughed loudly. If I had one, she'd be disappointed because I spend all my time working. I laughed too. I actually laughed. I still hate remembering that moment. Because the joke was much closer to the truth than I realized. A few weeks later, I was organizing documents in my office. Paperwork had always relaxed me. Numbers made sense. Documents made sense. People didn't. I was sorting insurance papers when I received an email. The subject line read, "Beneficiary information update required." I opened it casually. At first, everything looked normal. My name was listed, then I frowned. There were 3 more names, a woman, and 2 children. I blinked. I looked again. I didn't recognize any of them. I thought there had been some kind of mistake. I read the document again. Same names, same information. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. I immediately called the insurance company. A representative answered. I explained that there appeared to be an error. She checked the account, then she spoke. "No, ma'am, everything appears correct." I frowned. "What do you mean? The additional dependents have been listed for many years." I felt cold. "How many years?" Silence. Then she answered. "Approximately 14 years." 14 years. I stopped breathing. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Can you repeat that?" 14 years, ma'am." My hands started shaking. 14 years, a woman, 2 children, 14 years. Suddenly, every business trip, every late-night call, every weekend away, every little gift, everything felt different. I slowly hung up the phone, then I sat completely still. The office around me disappeared. I could hear only one thing. My heartbeat, fast, loud, terrified. I stared at the names on my screen. I didn't know who they were. But somehow, deep inside, I already knew. I looked at the clock. Daniel would be home in 2 hours. For the first time in 15 years, I wasn't excited to see my husband. I was afraid of him. And I had no idea that this single email was about to destroy everything I thought I knew about my marriage. I didn't sleep that night. I tried. I lay in bed with my eyes closed and listened to the sound of Daniel breathing beside me. The room was dark and quiet, but my mind was loud. 14 years, a woman, 2 children. I kept repeating those words in my head. I turned slightly and looked at him. He was sleeping peacefully. The same man who kissed my forehead every morning. The same man who held me while I cried about not having children. The same man who promised to spend his life making me happy. I stared at his face and suddenly realized something terrifying. I didn't know him. For 15 years, I had shared my life with a stranger. At one point, I almost woke him up. I wanted to shake him. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask him who those people were. But I didn't, because deep down, I was afraid of the answer. I stayed awake until sunrise. The next morning, I made him breakfast as if everything was normal. He smiled. "You look tired," I forced a smile. "I didn't sleep well." He kissed my forehead. "You should rest today." I almost cried. How could he look so normal? How could he lie so easily? He drank his coffee and checked his phone. Then he looked at me. "I have to leave this afternoon." I looked up. "For work," he nodded. 3-day project. 3 days, I simply nodded. My heart was beating so hard that I thought he could hear it. 3 days. I suddenly made a decision. I was going to follow him. I didn't know what I would find, but I needed the truth. Because the truth was already destroying me. At noon, Daniel packed a small bag. He hugged me. "I'll miss you." I forced another smile. "I'll miss you too." Then he walked out the door. I waited exactly 3 minutes. Then I grabbed my keys and followed him. I had never done anything like this before. I felt ridiculous, suspicious, almost guilty. But another part of me felt sick. My hands were shaking as I drove. I stayed several cars behind him. He drove through familiar streets, then unfamiliar ones. 40 minutes passed, then 50. Eventually, he entered a beautiful neighborhood. Large houses, quiet streets, children's bicycles in front yards, flower gardens. The kind of neighborhood I had always imagined raising a family in. Daniel slowed his car, then he parked. I immediately pulled over on the opposite side of the street. I couldn't breathe. I watched him step out of his car. He looked relaxed, happy, comfortable. As if he belonged there. Then the front door of a house opened. A woman stepped outside. She looked around my age. Long blonde hair, warm smile, comfortable clothes. She wasn't glamorous. She looked ordinary like me. Then she smiled at Daniel, and Daniel smiled back, not politely, not casually. He smiled the way married people smile at each other. My heart dropped. The woman walked toward him. Then she hugged him, not a quick hug, a familiar hug, an intimate hug, the kind of hug shared by 2 people who belong together. I felt my hands become cold. No, no, no. I couldn't think, I couldn't breathe. Then I heard something. The front door opened again. 2 children ran outside, a girl, a boy. They couldn't have been older than 12 and 10. The boy shouted first. "Dad," the girl laughed. "Daddy," I froze. Everything inside me stopped. Daniel opened his arms. The children ran into them. He hugged them. He lifted the little girl off the ground. Then he kissed both of their foreheads. I had never seen him look happier. He laughed, actually laughed. The kind of laugh that comes from pure joy. The kind of laugh I hadn't heard from him in years. I just sat there, unable to move, unable to think. I don't know how long I stayed in my car. 5 minutes. 10, maybe 20. I only know one thing. I was watching the man I loved living another life. And he looked completely at home. Then something happened that shattered me completely. The little boy handed Daniel a piece of paper. Daniel looked at it, then he hugged him proudly. I realized what it probably was. Homework, a school project, a drawing, something children share with their fathers. I suddenly couldn't see clearly anymore. Tears filled my eyes, because I remembered something. Years ago, I had cried in Daniel's arms because we couldn't have children. I remembered every doctor's appointment, every disappointment, every negative pregnancy test, every tear, every prayer. And while I was grieving the family we never had, he was already raising one. For 15 years, I finally started crying, not quietly, not gracefully. I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. I covered my mouth with my hand because I was afraid someone would hear me. I had never experienced pain like that, not when my father died, not when I lost my grandmother. Nothing had ever hurt this much, because grief is painful, but betrayal. Betrayal is grief mixed with humiliation. I felt stupid. I felt blind. I felt foolish. I kept asking myself one question: how did I not know? How could I not know? I watched them walk inside the house together. The woman, the children, Daniel, a family, a real family. Then the front door closed. I was left alone in my car, completely shattered. Eventually, I drove home. I don't remember most of the drive. I only remember crying. I arrived home and walked inside. The house was quiet. Our house. The house I had worked so hard to buy. I looked around. Our wedding pictures were everywhere. Pictures from vacations, anniversary photos, smiling memories. I suddenly felt sick. I took one of the pictures off the wall. I stared at it. We looked so happy. I touched Daniel's face in the photograph. Then I started crying again. Was any of it real? Had he ever loved me? Or had I simply been another chapter in his life? That night I sat on the floor for hours. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop thinking. The next morning, I did something I never thought I would do. I started investigating my husband. I searched social media. Nothing. Daniel barely used social media. Then I searched the woman's name, the same one listed on the insurance document. Sarah. Thousands of results appeared. Finally, I found her. I clicked her profile. Then my heart broke all over again. Photographs, hundreds of photographs, birthdays, family dinners, school events, picnics, Christmas mornings. And in nearly every picture, Daniel. Sometimes his face was partially hidden. Sometimes he stood in the background. Sometimes he held the children. But there was no doubt, it was him, my husband. I kept scrolling, then I found a photo that destroyed me. The caption said, "Our little family." The picture showed Sarah, the children, and Daniel all smiling together, the date on the photo. 12 years ago, 12 years, I felt dizzy. I looked through more photographs, another caption. The best father our children could ever ask for. I couldn't breathe, father. He wasn't just visiting them. He wasn't helping someone. He wasn't having an affair. He was living as their father. I looked at another picture. The little girl blowing out birthday candles. Daniel standing beside her, his arm around her shoulders, looking proud. Then another picture, a school graduation. Daniel clapping, another one, a beach vacation. Another, Christmas, another. Family dinner, years, thousands of memories, an entire life. I realized something horrifying. There were moments when he had left our house to spend holidays with them. I remembered all the excuses. Emergency project, unexpected work trip, client problems, lies, all lies. I closed my laptop. I couldn't take any more. Then I suddenly became angry. For almost 24 hours, I had been drowning in sadness. But now, I was furious, because this wasn't one mistake. This wasn't one affair. This wasn't one bad decision. This was 15 years of lies. 15 years of deception. 15 years of pretending. I stood up, walked to the bathroom, and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked terrible. Red eyes, pale face. Messy hair. I looked broken. I stared at my reflection. Then I said something out loud. I don't know who you are anymore. For the first time in my life, I wasn't speaking to Daniel. I was speaking to myself, because I no longer recognized the woman in the mirror. The trusting wife, the loyal partner, the woman who gave everything. She was gone. And standing in her place was someone else. Someone hurt, someone angry, someone who needed answers. I wiped my tears, picked up my phone, and made a decision. I wasn't going to confront Daniel. Not yet, because I had a feeling there was more, much more, and before I said a single word to him, I was going to learn every secret he had been hiding. I had no idea that the next discovery would hurt even more than finding his secret family. Because the betrayal wasn't only emotional, it was financial. The money I had spent 15 years earning was funding his other life. I thought discovering Daniel's secret family was the worst thing that could happen to me. I was wrong. The next betrayal was even crueler. Because affairs destroy your heart, but financial betrayal destroys your sense of safety. For almost 15 years, I had worked harder than anyone I knew. I had sacrificed vacations. I had skipped expensive dinners. I had worn old clothes for years because I preferred saving money. I wanted us to retire comfortably. I wanted us to have security. I wanted us to grow old without financial worries. I thought every sacrifice was for our future. I had no idea that my future was paying for someone else's present. The morning after I discovered Daniel's secret family, I sat in my home office. I couldn't stop thinking. Something didn't make sense. A second house, 2 children, school expenses, vacations, birthdays, 15 years of support. Daniel couldn't possibly afford all of that. I knew exactly how much he earned. I managed our finances. His salary alone wasn't enough, which meant only one thing. My money was involved. I suddenly felt cold. I opened my laptop. My hands were shaking. I logged into our financial accounts. At first, everything appeared normal. Checking accounts, savings, retirement investments. Nothing unusual. Then I started looking deeper. I reviewed old statements, then older ones, then even older ones. I noticed something. Every month there was a transfer. Not a large one, just enough to avoid attention. $500, sometimes $800, occasionally $1,000. I frowned. The transfers had different descriptions: business expenses, construction materials, temporary investments, but the destination account number was always the same. Always. I sat there staring at the screen. Then I checked another year, the same thing. Then another, and another, 14 years, every month. Thousands of dollars. I couldn't breathe. I grabbed my calculator. I started adding everything. The numbers kept growing. 10,000. 50,000. 100,000. I stopped. Then I started again. I thought I had made a mistake. I hadn't. By the time I finished calculating everything, I felt sick. Over 14 years, more than $300,000 had disappeared. $300,000. I stared at the number. I couldn't process it. That money represented years of my life. Early mornings, late nights, missed holidays, stress, exhaustion, sacrifice. I had earned every dollar, and Daniel had quietly transferred it away. I closed my eyes. I felt physically ill. Then another terrible thought entered my mind. What if there was more? I opened another folder, then another. I started investigating every account, every document, every transaction. And the truth became uglier. The house where Sarah lived wasn't rented. It had been purchased. The owner, a company. I recognized the company's name immediately, because I had created it years ago. Daniel had convinced me to open a small investment company for tax purposes. I had signed the paperwork without hesitation. I trusted him. Now I was staring at documents showing that company owned the house. Our company, our money, our investment. His secret family lived in a house I had unknowingly purchased. I felt my heart breaking all over again. I stood up so quickly that my chair almost fell. I started pacing. I couldn't stop moving. I couldn't stop crying. I kept repeating one sentence. No, no. No, this couldn't be real. People didn't do things like this. Not for 15 years. Not to someone they claimed to love. I thought about every anniversary, every birthday, every Christmas. I thought about every time Daniel looked me in the eyes and said, "I love you." Had he been lying every single time? I sat back down. Then I found school payments, medical expenses, clothing purchases, vacation expenses. The list seemed endless. I covered my face with my hands. I wasn't simply the betrayed wife. I had unknowingly become the financial provider of another family. I had paid for birthday presents I never attended. I had paid for family vacations I never enjoyed. I had paid for school supplies for children I didn't know existed. I suddenly remembered all the times I worked overtime. I remembered staying in the office until midnight. I remembered skipping meals. I remembered being exhausted. And where had that money gone? To Daniel's second life. I broke down completely. I cried harder than I ever had before. I cried until my head hurt, until my eyes burned, until I couldn't cry anymore. Then I sat in silence. The house felt strange, almost unfamiliar. I looked around the room. Every piece of furniture suddenly represented sacrifice. I had paid for almost everything. The house, the savings, the investments. I had spent 15 years trying to build a future. Daniel had spent 15 years stealing pieces of it. I don't know how long I sat there. Eventually, I walked into our bedroom. I looked at our wedding photograph. I picked it up. I stared at our smiling faces. Then I remembered something. A conversation from years ago. I had asked him, "Do you ever worry about the future?" He smiled. "No, because we're building it together." Together. The word almost made me laugh. We hadn't been building anything together. I had been building, he had been taking. I placed the photograph back on the dresser, then I looked in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked exhausted. She looked broken. She looked defeated. I barely recognized myself. I suddenly asked myself a question. What happens now? For several days, I moved through life like a ghost. I didn't answer phone calls. I ignored friends. I barely ate. I slept very little. I couldn't think about anything except Daniel. Everything reminded me of him. The coffee mug he used every morning. The sweater hanging in the closet. His shoes near the front door. Every object felt like evidence. Evidence of a life that wasn't real. I kept wondering if I should confront him immediately. Part of me wanted answers. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to throw every photograph in the house into the fireplace. But another part of me felt strangely calm. I realized something important. Daniel didn't know that I knew. For the first time in 15 years. I had the advantage. I knew his secret. He didn't know that I knew. And suddenly I stopped feeling powerless. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror again. I looked terrible. Dark circles under my eyes. Pale skin, no energy. I stared at myself. Then I remembered something my mother used to say. Pain either destroys you or introduces you to the person you're meant to become. I repeated those words quietly, then again, and again. Suddenly, I understood something. I couldn't control what Daniel had done. I couldn't change the last 15 years. I couldn't erase the lies, but I could decide what happened next. I looked at myself, really looked, then I said something out loud. "You need to stop crying." I surprised myself. I hadn't planned to say it, but once I said it, something changed. I wiped my tears. Straightened my shoulders, and took a deep breath. I wasn't the guilty person. I wasn't the liar. I wasn't the thief. I wasn't the cheater. Why was I behaving like I had done something wrong? I walked back into my office, opened my laptop again, and started organizing documents. Every bank statement, every transfer, every property document, every transaction. I created folders, made notes. Saved copies. Hours passed, then more hours. By midnight, I had collected enough information to understand something terrifying. This wasn't an affair. This was a double life, carefully planned. Carefully hidden, maintained for 15 years. No one accidentally lies for 15 years. No one accidentally raises another family. Every decision had been intentional. That realization hurt. But strangely, it also made me stronger, because if his betrayal had been intentional, then my response could be intentional too. Around 2 in the morning, I closed my laptop. I felt exhausted. But for the first time in days, I didn't feel helpless. I felt angry, and anger gave me energy. The next morning, I put on professional clothes, did my hair, applied makeup, looked into the mirror. I still looked sad, but I also looked determined. I picked up my phone. Then I searched for the best divorce attorneys in the city. I stared at the screen for several minutes. I never imagined I would do something like this. I loved my husband, or at least the version of him I thought existed. Calling a lawyer felt like admitting my marriage was over. I looked at my wedding ring. 15 years. 15 years of memories. 15 years of dreams. I slowly removed the ring, placed it on my desk, and picked up my phone. Then I made the call. A calm voice answered. Law offices of Margaret Hayes. I swallowed hard. Hello, I need legal advice. An appointment was scheduled for the next day. After hanging up, I sat quietly. My life had officially changed. There was no going back. I looked around my office. The sunlight was coming through the windows. Everything appeared normal, yet nothing was normal anymore. Because the woman who had walked into this room a few days earlier no longer existed. She had believed in forever. She had trusted completely. She had loved without questions. That woman was gone. And in her place stood someone new, someone hurt, someone betrayed, someone awake. I looked at the folders on my desk, then at my wedding ring, then at the empty chair beside me. And I made myself one final promise. I would not allow Daniel to destroy the rest of my life. I had already lost 15 years. I wasn't going to lose myself too. The next morning, I walked into my lawyer's office carrying a box of evidence. I thought I was bringing documents. I didn't realize I was carrying the pieces of a man who was about to lose everything. The next morning, I walked into the lawyer's office carrying a cardboard box full of documents, bank statements, property records, insurance papers, investment reports. 14 years of lies, neatly organized in folders. The receptionist smiled politely and asked me to have a seat. I looked around the waiting room. Everything seemed so ordinary. People were reading magazines. Someone was talking quietly on the phone. Outside, traffic moved normally. I remember thinking something strange. How could the world continue as if nothing had happened? Because my entire life had just collapsed. A few minutes later, a woman opened the door. Emily, I stood. She extended her hand. I'm Margaret Hayes. She looked confident and calm, the kind of person who had seen everything. I followed her into her office. She gestured toward a chair. What can I help you with? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I placed the box on her desk. Then I said something I never thought I would say. I think my husband has another family. She looked at me carefully. Then she opened the first folder. For nearly 2 hours, I told her everything. The insurance documents, the photographs. The house, the children, the bank transfers. She listened without interrupting. Occasionally, she took notes. When I finally finished speaking, the room became quiet. She slowly closed the folder. Then she looked at me. How long have you been married? 15 years. And how long has this other relationship existed? Almost 15 years. She sighed. I could see genuine sympathy in her eyes. Then she asked the question I wasn't expecting. Do you still love him? Tears filled my eyes. I looked down. I don't know, because that was the truth. I didn't know. I loved the man I thought I married. But that man apparently never existed. Margaret nodded slowly. Then she said something that changed my thinking. Emily, right now you're dealing with 2 losses. You've lost your marriage, and you've lost the person you believed your husband was. I started crying, because she understood perfectly. I wasn't grieving one thing, I was grieving everything. She handed me tissues and waited patiently. Finally, she opened another file. Financially speaking, this is serious. I looked up. What do you mean? Your husband appears to have hidden assets and used marital funds without disclosure. Depending on the laws involved, there could be significant consequences. I stared at her. Consequences? I hadn't thought that far ahead. For days, I had only focused on the betrayal. I hadn't considered what happened next. Margaret folded her hands. Do you want a divorce? The question felt enormous. I thought about it. Then I thought about Daniel laughing with those children. I thought about him kissing Sarah. I thought about 15 years of lies, then I answered. Yes. The word felt heavy, but strangely. It also felt right, Margaret nodded. Then we need to be strategic. Strategic. I liked that word, because for days I had felt powerless. Suddenly I didn't. She reviewed every document carefully, then she looked at me. Does your husband know that you've discovered everything? No, she smiled slightly. Good. I looked confused. She continued. The person with information has power. Right now, that's you. For the first time in days, I felt something unexpected. Control. I wasn't completely helpless. I had evidence, I had documents, and most importantly, I had the truth. I left her office feeling different. Still hurt, still devastated, but stronger. As I drove home, I thought about my marriage. I realized something painful. For 15 years, I had been reacting to Daniel's choices. His work schedule, his business trips, his excuses, his lies. I had spent 15 years adapting my life around his decisions. Not anymore. Now I was making decisions, and the first one was simple. I wasn't going to confront him immediately. I was going to wait. 3 days later, Daniel returned from his business trip. I heard his car pull into the driveway. A few seconds later, the front door opened. "Emily," I was sitting on the couch. I looked up. He smiled, then he walked over and kissed my forehead. "I missed you." I almost couldn't breathe, because less than 24 hours earlier, he had probably kissed another woman goodbye. I forced myself to smile. "I missed you too." The lie tasted bitter. He sat beside me. Then he started talking about his trip, the construction project, the long hours, the difficult clients. Lie. Lie, lie. Every sentence was another lie. I simply listened. It was strange. A week earlier, I would have believed every word. Now all I could see was a stranger. I studied his face while he spoke. He looked comfortable, relaxed, confident, a man with absolutely no idea that his entire world was about to collapse. That night, I couldn't sleep. Daniel wrapped his arm around me and fell asleep quickly. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I kept thinking about one question: how many times had this happened? How many nights had he returned from his other family and climbed into bed beside me? Hundreds. Thousands. I quietly moved his arm away. Then I turned to face the opposite direction. For the first time in 15 years, I didn't want him touching me. The following week felt surreal. I acted normal. I cooked dinner. We watched television. We talked about ordinary things. I smiled, I laughed, I pretended. And every day I collected more information, more documents, more evidence. I became an actress in my own marriage. Then something unexpected happened. Our 15th wedding anniversary arrived. I had completely forgotten about it. Daniel hadn't. That morning, I walked into the kitchen and found flowers on the table. Beautiful white roses. My favorite. I stared at them. Then I noticed a card. "Happy anniversary, sweetheart. 15 years and I still choose you every day. Love, Daniel." I couldn't move. I read the card again. "I still choose you every day." I almost laughed. The cruelty of that sentence was unbelievable. He entered the kitchen smiling. "Surprise." I looked at him. He seemed genuinely happy. "I made reservations tonight." I nodded slowly. "Okay." He kissed my cheek. "You deserve a special evening." I watched him leave for work, then I looked at the flowers again. Something changed inside me. A calmness, an unusual calmness. I suddenly knew exactly what I was going to do. I called Margaret. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Yes, tonight." "Tonight." There was silence. Then she said, "All right." That afternoon, I prepared carefully. I wore a dark blue dress, simple makeup, simple jewelry. I looked elegant. Confident, I looked like a woman attending an anniversary dinner, but inside, I was preparing for war. Before leaving, I picked up a folder. Inside were photographs, financial records, insurance documents, everything, 15 years of secrets. I placed the folder in my purse, then I looked at myself in the mirror. My heart was racing, but my hands were steady. I was ready. The restaurant was beautiful, soft music, candles, white tablecloths, people were smiling, celebrating birthdays and anniversaries. Daniel seemed excited. He ordered wine. He smiled constantly. At one point, he reached across the table and held my hand. "I can't believe it's been 15 years. I looked at him. "Neither can I," he smiled. "We've built a beautiful life together." I stared at him. Beautiful. The word almost hurt. The waiter brought our food. Daniel lifted his glass. "To us." I looked at him. Then I slowly put down my fork. I reached into my purse and removed the folder. I placed it on the table. He looked confused. "What's this?" I didn't answer. He opened it. The first photograph was on top, the picture of him hugging Sarah. I watched the color leave his face. He looked at the next page. Bank statements, then another. Insurance documents, then another. Photographs of the children. Silence, complete silence. He looked up at me. His face had turned white. I had never seen someone look so frightened. He whispered one word. "No," I finally spoke. "Yes," he looked around nervously, then back at me. "Emily," I said nothing. He swallowed hard. "I can explain." I looked directly into his eyes. "No, Daniel," he stared at me. I continued. 15 years was your explanation." He looked like someone had punched him. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then his eyes filled with tears. "Please," I almost didn't recognize his voice. "Please let me explain." I leaned back in my chair, and for the first time in days, I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, no shock. Nothing, because the woman who loved him had already disappeared. All that remained was the truth. And the truth was sitting across from me, terrified, broken, finally understanding. That secrets can survive for years, but consequences always arrive eventually. For several seconds, we just stared at each other. The restaurant around us seemed to disappear. People were talking. Glasses were clinking, soft music was playing, but all I could hear was my own heartbeat. Daniel looked terrified. His hands were shaking. He looked at the photographs again, then at me. Then back at the photographs. Finally, he whispered, "How long have you known?" I looked at him calmly. "Long enough." He closed the folder, then opened it again. As if the evidence might somehow disappear, it didn't, because the truth doesn't disappear just because you're afraid of it. He looked up. Tears were forming in his eyes. "Emily, please. I can explain everything." I almost smiled, not because anything was funny, but because that sentence was ridiculous. Explain what? Explain 15 years of lies? Explain another woman? Explain 2 children? Explain stealing money from our future? Some things cannot be explained. They can only be admitted. I looked at him. "No, Daniel. Tonight you don't get to explain." He looked completely lost. For the first time in 15 years, he wasn't controlling the situation. I was. He leaned forward. "Please don't do this." I frowned. "Don't do what?" "Destroy our marriage." I stared at him. Then I actually laughed. A small, sad laugh. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I looked directly into his eyes. "I didn't destroy our marriage." He said nothing. I continued. "You destroyed it 15 years ago." He looked like he couldn't breathe. For a moment he looked old, exhausted, defeated. He whispered, "I never wanted to hurt you." That sentence hurt more than I expected, because sometimes people think good intentions erase bad actions. They don't. I slowly shook my head. "That's the problem, Daniel." He looked confused. "You didn't want to hurt me, but you hurt me anyway, every single day for 15 years. Tears rolled down his face. I had never seen him cry before. Not when his father died, not during difficult times, never, and yet I felt nothing, because my tears had already been spent. I had cried enough for both of us. He suddenly reached across the table and grabbed my hand. "Please, we can fix this." I slowly pulled my hand away. "No, we can go to counseling." "No, I'll end everything." I looked at him carefully. Everything. He was calling another family everything. A woman, 2 children, 15 years, everything. I realized something painful. He truly thought this was a problem that could be solved. As if he had forgotten an anniversary. As if he had made one mistake. He still didn't understand. He hadn't broken my trust. He had built our entire marriage on dishonesty. I looked at him quietly. Then I asked one question. "Did you ever love me?" He looked shocked. "Of course I did." I waited. Then I asked another question. "Did you love her too?" Silence. That was my answer, because if he had said yes, he would be admitting his betrayal. And if he had said no, he would be admitting he had lied to another woman and 2 innocent children. He couldn't answer, because every answer exposed him. I nodded slowly. "I see. Emily." I stood up. He immediately stood up too. "Please don't leave." I looked at him one last time, then I said something I had needed to say for days. "I already left." And then I walked away. I cried on the drive home, not because I missed him, not because I regretted my decision. I cried because I finally accepted something. My marriage was over. Not damaged, not struggling, over. I walked into our house. For several minutes I stood in the living room. The photographs were still there, the memories were still there. But something felt different. The house no longer felt like a home. It felt like a museum, a building full of memories that belonged to someone else. I walked upstairs, opened my closet, and removed my wedding dress. I hadn't looked at it in years. I sat on the floor and held it in my hands. I remembered the woman who wore it. She believed in forever. She believed promises mattered. She believed love and honesty belonged together. I almost cried again. Then I carefully folded the dress and put it away, because I wasn't burying my past. I was accepting it. The next morning, I officially filed for divorce. Daniel called 23 times. I didn't answer. He sent messages. I didn't respond. Flowers arrived. I returned them. Letters arrived. I never opened them. For 15 years, I had listened to him. Now I needed silence. Then something happened that changed everything. The legal process began, and the truth became even uglier. Because documents don't have emotions, they simply tell the truth, and the truth was devastating. Daniel had hidden money, transferred assets, used marital accounts, purchased property, moved investments. The evidence was overwhelming. Margaret looked at me. "This is serious." "How serious?" She looked at the documents. "Very serious." I simply nodded. At that point, nothing surprised me anymore. The court proceedings lasted several months. Those months felt like years. I learned things I never wanted to know. I learned where my money had gone. I learned how carefully he had planned everything. I learned how long the deception had really been. But I also learned something important. I was stronger than I thought. Every meeting, every document, every difficult conversation, I survived all of it. Slowly, I started feeling different. I wasn't healing yet, but I was changing. I wasn't the same woman who had sat crying on the bathroom floor. I was becoming someone new, someone stronger. Then another bomb exploded. Sarah discovered the truth. Apparently, Daniel had lied to her too. She believed he was divorced. She believed he lived alone. She believed she was his real partner. She had no idea I existed. When I heard that, I sat in complete silence. For several minutes, I couldn't speak, because suddenly, everything became even more tragic. I wasn't the only victim. Sarah had been living inside a lie too. 2 women, 1 dishonest man, 2 destroyed lives. I thought I would feel satisfaction. I didn't. I simply felt tired. Months later, I learned she had left him. I wasn't surprised. Trust is difficult to rebuild, especially when it never existed. Then the court reached its final decision. Because of hidden assets and financial misconduct, I received a significant settlement. I kept our house, a large portion of our investments, and financial compensation. Daniel was forced to sell properties, liquidate accounts, reorganize everything. His entire world changed. The life he had carefully built for 15 years collapsed in front of him. And for the first time, he had nobody to blame except himself. Nearly a year later, my phone rang. I looked at the screen. "Daniel." I considered ignoring it. Then I answered. Silence. Then his voice. "Hi." He sounded different, older, exhausted. I didn't say anything. Finally, he spoke. "I just wanted to hear your voice." I closed my eyes. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then he said something unexpected. "I ruined everything." I looked out the window. The sun was setting. Birds were flying across the sky. The world looked peaceful. I thought about his words. I ruined everything. For a long time, I had waited to hear him admit that. And now that he finally had, it didn't matter. I felt nothing. Because healing changes you. Pain changes you. Time changes you. I finally spoke. "No, Daniel." Silence. "You ruined everything 15 years ago." I heard him breathing. Then I continued. "The consequences simply arrived late." He started crying. I listened quietly. Then he whispered something. "I'm sorry." For some reason, those words didn't make me angry. They didn't make me happy either. They were simply too late. I looked at the sunset. Then I said, "Goodbye, Daniel," and I ended the call. I never heard from him again. Today, I live in a smaller house near a lake. I planted flowers in the garden. I adopted a dog named Charlie. I travel whenever I want. I read books. I take long walks. Sometimes I sit on my porch and watch the sunset. I have peace. And after everything that happened, Peace feels like a luxury. People often ask me if I regret leaving. Never. Because leaving wasn't the end of my story, it was the beginning of my life. For a long time, I thought revenge meant making someone suffer. I thought revenge meant anger, punishment, pain. But I was wrong. The greatest revenge isn't destroying the person who betrayed you. The greatest revenge is refusing to let their betrayal destroy you. It's choosing yourself. It's rebuilding. It's finding joy again. It's waking up one morning and realizing that their choices no longer control your happiness. My husband spent 15 years living a lie. I spent 1 year rebuilding my truth. And in the end, I didn't lose my marriage, I lost an illusion. What I gained was something far more valuable, myself.